Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. A bit of an update one today then. You might remember that I did a video a little while back about this guy, Detective Sergeant Benjamin McNish. So just to fill you in, DS McNish is obviously a police officer from the Metropolitan Police, surprise surprise. He's married with 2 children, and one day he decided to crap all over his career prospects by filming a woman showering for his own gratification, apparently. Now, this is his mugshot, and I think I've said before, but if that isn't the face of a man who knows he's been caught, then I don't know what is. Getting arrested by your own colleagues for a sex crime probably gets the adrenaline pumping, so he probably actually enjoyed the thrill, to be honest. He does seem the type. DS McNish was hauled into court due to the non-corrupt officers around him, so props to them. He was actually with this woman and another colleague, a male colleague, and they were in a hotel preparing to go to a conference. And in the morning, this woman was showering, and that is when DS McNish went into the shower room and recorded her over the top of the shower cubicle with his phone, not once, but twice. Because she saw the phone the first time, he retracted it, and then he popped it back over again. His ridiculous and insultingly stupid excuse in court was that he was simply filming the shower unit while a naked woman was showering in it in order to look for his blue razor. He said that he was using the phone as an extension of his eyes in order to look for his razor. Well, one part of that statement is true. He was using the phone as an extension of his eyes, but nobody believes anything about the razor. And to this day, I still don't know why the colour of the razor was important enough to be mentioned, but never mind. He must rue the day that he got that razor if his story is true, because it ruined his life. But of course the story was absolute bollocks. He went along with it anyway because, as I also pointed out in that video, many bad police officers believe they've got the invincibility cheat turned on, and that's a pretty dangerous way to walk around life. The uniform should not be able to promote a feeling of untouchability, whether you're wearing it or not. That is how a psychopath operates in their day-to-day life, walking around feeling untouchable, not afraid of any consequences. In a healthy society, trainee police officers who display that kind of personality trait would be removed, but I don't know how you test for massive ego tripping that makes you feel invincible. Anyway, Benjamin McNish had his day in court. He was found guilty, then his invincibility kicked in, and he doesn't have to spend a single day in prison. Of course, I'm not suggesting the judge did let him off because he was a cop, but I think this guy should have gone to jail for that, with his position and with the impact that it must have had on the victim and the absolute brazenness of the crime. I personally think he should have gone to jail. He was sentenced to 20 weeks imprisonment, but it was suspended for 2 years, so he won't serve a day. And he was also put in the sex offenders register for only 7 years. And he was ordered to do a sexual offenders programme, whatever that is, as if that's going to help. He was also ordered to attend rehabilitation and pay £750 in costs. So let's hope he's learned his lesson, because voyeurism is not a petty crime. It can escalate into more serious criminal behaviour, so in my opinion, people who engage in voyeurism should be monitored in some capacity. Dr. Clarissa Cole, who is a doctor of forensic psychology with over a decade of experience with sex offenders, wrote an article a couple of years ago stating that when she began working with sex offenders, she noticed a striking pattern, and that was that almost every one of the rapists and the serious sexual offenders that she worked with began their criminal career of violating other people with the act of voyeurism. She began looking at people's criminal records after noticing this, and again was struck by the fact that most of the rapists that she worked with had multiple charges of voyeurism type crimes. All of them had been let off extremely lightly. None of them had served jail for these voyeurism type crimes. That shows that voyeurism is not treated seriously. It's an interesting article. I'll link it down below as well. It's obviously based in the US, but it applies everywhere. Now, I'm not saying that McNish has any desire or would even be likely to commit further crimes, but what I'm saying is, based on the testimony of experts like Clarissa Cole, people who are convicted of voyeurism should be on the sex offenders register for life. There's no point taking somebody off the sex offenders register after 7 years because they're still a sex offender. What's the point in having a register if you're going to take somebody's name off it at a certain point? So McNish is now suspended from the police, probably on full pay, and the fact that he wasn't jailed will probably surprise very few people, and it will also further dismay people who believe that bad police officers are allowed to get away with things that normal members of the public, thankfully, are not allowed to get away with. We kind of saw this in the case of PC Wayne Couzens, the killer of Sarah Everard, who a few days before he escalated to murder, he exposed himself in a takeaway, and he wasn't reprimanded by his bosses for this, who knew about the report. He was still working as an on-duty cop after exposing himself in a restaurant, which beggars belief. Now, needless to say, that seems to have been brushed away by the looks of things. You don't really see any mention of that in the media now, but it would be interesting to know how they're getting on with their internal investigation as to why that was ignored, because this guy shouldn't have had a uniform the second his superiors found out about that. Let's squeeze in another story of a police officer who was let off, this time for perverting the course of justice. It's a slightly different situation here. From Court News UK, a police officer who provided a false statement to help a colleague who was involved in an 89-mile-an-hour crash while answering an emergency call was handed a suspended jail sentence. This woman, PC Donna Coker, lied after another cop, PC Verinder Semi, crashed his police car into some innocent member of the public's car in Ealing at almost 90 miles an hour. This was back in August 2017, so it's taken a few years to actually get to court. Now, according to the Met Police's own website, PC Semi was found guilty of causing serious injury by dangerous driving at the Crown Court on the 12th of March. He was sentenced to 9 months imprisonment. It was also suspended for 18 months, surprise surprise, and he was given a 2-year driving ban. But PC Donna Coker, who was actually an attending officer, she decided she was going to step in and try and help PC Semi, and she made the decision to lie in her statement about the driver who was hit. She claimed that this innocent driver, a guy called Mr. Tarnowski, appeared to be drunk. So she's basically accusing him of potentially drink driving and therefore being responsible for the crash which almost killed him, which is extremely malicious. Her lawyer, Guy Landenberg, he brushed it off as if it was a big fat nothing burger. He told the Crown Court that her conduct was to try and keep PC Semi off the hook, rather than put Mr. Tarnowski on it. Bullshit. He went on, the lawyer, to say, in reality, that was never likely to put Mr. Tarnowski in jeopardy, so the suspicion that was cast on Mr. Tarnowski was short-lived. It was not only unsuccessful, it was bound to be unsuccessful, he said of her attempt to frame an innocent man. So that's all fine then, according to this lawyer. An attempted murder or attempted robbery isn't serious at all because it was doomed to fail. I mean, this woman literally tried to frame an innocent member of the public into being arrested for being a criminal and responsible for the car crash which almost killed him, and she's a police officer. She was attending the scene of the crash. She was supposed to have been in a position of trust. This guy sustained multiple serious injuries and may well have died, and yet he's getting questioned about whether he was drunk when he wasn't. It's a frightening lack of concern for another human being. She tried to throw this guy under the bus, pardon the pun. And again, good on the colleagues who actually highlighted this to their superiors and the officers who ensured that this moronic sociopath, in my opinion, was brought to justice, or some justice. But again, she did escape prison, despite the fact that she definitely should have been jailed for this. She turned up to court and, lo and behold, because it takes too long to get anything into court, she was 7 months pregnant. Now, this clearly had an impact on the judge's decision not to jail her. I'm not going to crap on the judge for that one. I'm not one for heaping stress onto heavily pregnant women. I'm not a monster. I would just imprison her as soon as the baby is born. But the judge, Gregory Perrins, decided not to jail her. But he wasn't buying her lawyer's fob off either. And when he was sentencing her, he said, "I completely reject the suggestion that this was somehow reckless behaviour. Your sole intention was to provide an account that would shift the blame away from your colleague and onto the victim. You thought there was nothing wrong in shifting the blame onto an innocent member of the public. What you did and the level of corruption it displays could serve to seriously undermine the confidence of the public in the Metropolitan Police. Even in the face of compelling evidence at your trial, you refused to take responsibility for your actions or accept that what you did was wrong. He then goes on to acknowledge the fact that she's 7 months pregnant, that it was not a straightforward pregnancy, and the statement from her midwife was received saying that a prison sentence would not only affect her mental health, I'm sorry, but that's something that everyone who goes to jail has to deal with, but it would also affect the health of her baby. So that is why, by the looks of things, she was sentenced to 18 months prison, suspended for 2 years. Interesting to note that in this case, her prison sentence, her 18 months suspended sentence, is double that of the 9-month prison sentence, which was also suspended, that her colleague got, that she was trying to protect, the guy who was driving like a tit and smashed into an innocent person. She got double. So I do quite like the judge in this one. He seems to have had his head screwed on a little bit more than some of the judges that I have mentioned in cases previously in videos. In my opinion, he's perceived things in the correct way. Whether the sentence fits the crime in this case, I'll leave that to you to decide down below. Let me know what you think. Did she just get away with it because she turned up pregnant? Do you think that pregnancy is an invincibility cheat for female criminals? Should it be? These are interesting moral questions. But I'll leave that one there, folks. Please do leave your comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like it, and also leave a like if you like it, and keep me updated with any interesting stories as well. You can catch me on Twitter at Chancer Media, and you can also catch me on Odyssey, where I'm just called Chancer. Feel free to check that out, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, folks.